Welcome to Becoming Untriggered, a podcast brought to you by psychodynamic coaches and parents of three, Lavinia Brown and Andrew Lynn.
Together we normalise and unpack common challenges faced by couples and parents, explore how these could be symptoms of unprocessed trauma, and support you with the tried and tested tools for you to show up as the mum or dad, partner, and person you deserve to be. Welcome to Becoming Untriggered. Today we're looking at a slightly taboo subject, and that is intimacy. How it is affected by becoming a parent, birth, the whole physical process, how it's affected by having small kids and not so small kids, being knackered all of the time, and how it's affected by trauma. So both the trauma of early, perhaps too early sexual experiences that weren't necessarily consensual, and also trauma, attachment trauma from your childhood. So we're going to start off with birth because everyone listening is a parent, so we've all been through birth. Birth is such a physical process. And obviously the woman is at one end and usually the man is at the other, or the man may go from one end to the other. So I think women often underestimate what the man has witnessed, and that can then create issues post-birth because the woman's not aware of it. And in our experience anyway, you were a little bit less hesitant to be intimate because of what you'd witnessed, which wasn't that pleasant.
I think I was shocked, still in shock.
Yeah.
I think nothing quite prepares you for the experience of birth. I don't know how many classes we went to, but there couldn't have been enough classes to prepare us for the experience. It's quite shocking, it's quite traumatic.
It's raw.
Well, it was
it's
for
animal.
It was for us. I think maybe some people have a bit more of an organic, flowy process, but we were in the middle of London. It was pretty stressful. And yeah, I think just the physical process of witnessing your body changing and your body giving birth and the stresses and the things that it went through, I think is quite traumatic. Well, it was traumatic for me.
And I guess that's what differentiates us from animals. An animal has sex to create young, right? The male animal isn't thinking about being intimate or nurturing or loving. It just does it. So a male animal doesn't care if the female animal's just given birth or not. It's when that emotional layer comes in that can affect the physical impulse. And it happens both ways, right? When you've just given birth as a woman, you're sore, right? Everything is sore, and you are maybe breastfeeding and your stomach's still enormous and you've been mashed up inside. So the woman may have the emotional desire to be intimate, but not feel ready physically. And perhaps it's the opposite with the man. The man may want to, obviously I'm massively generalizing here, but sometimes the other partner may want to or be more ready to do something physically, but because of what they've witnessed, not be ready emotionally. And both ways, there just isn't the support. There isn't the support there for either partner, which I think is an issue, because you then don't necessarily know how to talk about it, or you don't necessarily know how to be honest about the fact that you're not ready. So I know a lot of my clients don't know how to say no or how to ask for sex. They don't, either way. If they want sex and their partner doesn't, or if their partner wants sex and they don't, it's quite taboo to be able to say, I'm not ready, no tonight, because often you think, well, the other partner's going to go off and be unfaithful, because if I'm not servicing them, inverted commas, then someone else will. So it's really important to talk about needs and be really, really honest, and be really honest and be able to lay those boundaries down, be confident enough in who you are and what your reasons are for saying no or for wanting something.
Yeah, I think it is really important, but I do think it's difficult to be honest. Obviously, from a man's point of view, after birth is a very emotional time. There's lots of hormones flying around. And really, you're going into a support role as the man. You still have your needs. You're still a man. You're still going out to work and doing your thing. But your whole home life has been turned upside down. This partner that you had, I mean, we're talking about first children here, really, as an example.
Yeah, your roles have changed.
But the first, you had a partner at home, a sexual partner, a woman that you're attracted to, that is a sexual being. And now you've got somebody who's at home, who's a mum, whose primary role is now, at least for the first few years, is taking care of this child, breastfeeding, and she's just given birth to your child, so you're extremely grateful for her, you love her, but you're supposed to have the same level of sexual attraction for her. And obviously the woman wants to be sexually attractive, but something changes.
And your roles change at home, right? Yeah, often straight after birth, the woman will perhaps be more in control, or at least when the kids are a little bit older, they often become the CEO of the house, or one partner becomes the CEO of the house. Or in my case, I kind of collapsed. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I found I needed you a lot more than I'd ever needed you. Having been really quite independent and self-reliant, self-sufficient, when it came to feeling unprepared to look after a child, I suddenly probably became really, really needy, which isn't particularly attractive. So when the kids are older and the one partner that stays at home becomes more of the CEO, then often the partner that goes out to work isn't so much in control, and that's not attractive either. So it's really difficult maintaining intimacy, sexual attraction, with this kind of constantly shifting roles as your kids get older.
I think it definitely changes. I mean, our kids are older now. Our kids are 11, 13, 14, something like that. And we've been through that whole process. I think when, just after birth, when you've got young kids, intimacy changes, like you said. It becomes less about physical intimacy or less about sex, which is hard. You don't know that. Nobody tells you that. No. You have got needs. You're supposed to have needs. You're supposed to find the other person attractive. You want to support them. Like, it's really confusing. Yeah. But actually, it's not about your sexual needs necessarily when you've got a young kid.
But like you said, you think you're meant to, because that's a stamp of a healthy, inverted commas, relationship. Exactly. So any young parents out there, I just want to say right now, and this happens a lot. I hear it a lot. So really, it's very common. Don't think that your relationship is on the rocks if you don't fancy each other, if you don't want sex as much as you did before, if there's no time for sex, if your intimate needs have changed. It doesn't mean that that's forever. Every phase of childhood, having children changes you, and you have to flex with that. I mean, for example, now, I feel just as knackered. I'm not waking up in the night like I was before to breastfeed, but I feel just as knackered as I did then, because obviously I'm older, got less energy. But, the kids stay up so fucking late, and I want to go to bed, and I can't go to sleep because they're up and making a smoothie or having a snack or whatever it is that they want to do. So it's really annoying. You kind of think, oh, finally my kid's sleeping through the night, and then it changes again and your kid wants to sleep all morning, which I find really annoying because I wasn't allowed to. Back to trauma from childhood, to then wanting to be up all night. So that tiredness.
It's a different challenge.
Yeah, and tiredness, again, affects whether you're up for intimacy or not.
You mentioned it earlier, but at the end of the night, even now at the end of the night, I'm pretty exhausted. We're both pretty exhausted. You mentioned earlier encouraging your clients to schedule some brunch sex in earlier in the day.
Yeah.
Which I think is actually, it may not be the most romantic thing.
It's totally not romantic. It's awful.
It's quite functional.
And then there's the whole performance anxiety. I mean, for me anyway, if I know I have to have sex or I have to be intimate, that's the last thing I want to do, And again, it goes back to childhood. You don't want to be told what to do and how to do it. But it may be the only thing to do to make sure that your physical relationship stays alive. Just whilst you're surviving with kids?
Let's go back a little bit to the early years that we talked about. We talked about birth.
Mm.
And then you get a period, talking from my point of view, talking from my personal experience, where you've gone through the process of, you've met somebody, you're attracted to them, you've got a sexual relationship, then you've got the bit of a bombshell that is birth. And then you've got this thing where your partner is now a mother.
Mm.
So you've got your partner, from a man's point of view, the mum has now got kids hanging off them. They've got often breastfeeding for a year. So the breasts that maybe were a thing of attraction for you before are now a feeding tool for your kids, which is amazing, but it just changes your relationship with them from a sexual point of view. So I think that's another phase to kind of, number one, be aware of and get through. But talking from experience, 10 years later, I do think it's changed. I mean, it has changed for us and have been for many years, kind of connected to your body. I no longer look at your body as a mother's body. Mm. So you do get through that phase.
Definitely.
From a sexual attraction point of view. So important to bear that in mind. Important, like a lot of things in parenthood, a lot of it is about getting through the phase you're in. And certainly that's the same for sexual relationship and intimacy.
And not blaming the other person, which is a bit of a theme for all of these podcasts. Not taking out on the other person, understanding what's going on, and looking at the root cause. So let's talk about trauma, how trauma can manifest an intimate relationship. So first of all, what were you role modeled by your parents? I think this is really important. People really underestimate it. Everyone knows that, the kind of Freudian, you might marry your father or marry the opposite of your father, and that the mother is kind of in love with her son type of, again, huge generalization. But beyond that, people don't really think of how their parents' relationship, and whether they were intimate or not, whether they were affectionate or not in front of you, how that affected how they then express their love for their partner. And it's a really big thing. Like, I know my parents weren't physical really at all. So I wasn't role modeled a lot of affection. They didn't give me much affection. And my brother was very affectionate. And because it was my little brother, I was like, get off me. So I pushed him away, and then I got told off for that, and I got called cold, which looking back on looks ridiculous, because I'm like, well, you were cold. So how could you possibly call me cold just because I didn't want to, be affectionate with my sibling? Like, who watching our kids now, they don't want to be affectionate with each other. It's a ridiculous expectation.
Where's that affection supposed to come from?
Yeah. So that wasn't role model to me, but also I was spanked. So by spanking, I know there's a slightly different term for it in America. It can mean something different, but I was properly, go upstairs. We'd wait till my dad came home from work. My mum would deliver the bad news that what we'd done. We knew we were going to be spanked all day, dreading it all day. And then pants down, whacked on the bum for about 5 minutes with a slipper or a belt even. It was awful. And I know a lot of my English clients have also been spanked in that way. Americans tend to have, they call spanking more like a tap on the bum, which is just as bad. But it's interesting that there are two different kind of definitions. But to be spanked, to be hit, really affects you. So first of all, there's the part of the body that you are being hit. If you're being tapped, spanked, slapped, doesn't matter, on the bum, your bum is part of an intimate area, and you may have had to take your clothes off or not. If you did, it's even worse. There's a lot of shame around that. It's a very intimate part of your body. It should be a consensual part of your body. So there's so many lines that are crossed if you experience physical punishment. And then if you were spanked by a male or a female, again, that will affect how you view that male or female figure, your mother or father, and whether they are safe or not. So for me, it was my father, but I was also slapped by my mother. So it felt like there was no safe partner. And I'm talking about this because it comes into safe touch. If touch hasn't always been safe, then no matter how safe it is with your current partner, it can still feel a bit unsafe until you have processed those unsafe memories. So that's a really big thing, I think, that you are perhaps bringing into a relationship without realizing that it might still be alive. Because obviously your partner loves you. Obviously, one would hope your partner's not going to be hitting you unless it's consensual, but that can come into it, that fear of violence, that fear of power over, that fear of having to do something that you had no control over, that was shameful. So that can bring shame into intimacy that should never have been there.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. For me, I didn't particularly get hit as a child, but I know there's some different themes for me. A couple of things. So first of all, kind of the pressure, the societal pressure of performance and being a man and growing up, not being educated properly, not having a father figure say to you, this is what life is, this is what sex is, this is how to be a man, So you're going through life basically learning about sex in the playground or learning about sex through pornography. And forming an expectation of self through basically the lies of children and some professional sexual performance when you're like 14.
Yeah.
So for me, there's always been an element of performance and therefore performance anxiety. So not going into sex from a view of being close, from a view of sharing an experience, from a point of view of being vulnerable, but it being some kind of performance. So that's often come up throughout my life, especially like you said, when there are certain like pressure situations where, okay, we've got like 10 minutes, we've got 15 minutes to do this, and we're going to do it tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, I'm performing tomorrow at 11 o'clock. That always brings up that little bit of performance anxiety. So that's definitely something that I didn't recognize. It was there in my life throughout my teens, throughout my 20s, throughout my 30s. And it was only by doing this work, starting to do the inner work, starting to look at past, starting to look at unconscious behaviors, that it really kind of shone a light on this performance.
And also perhaps being way more vulnerable than you've ever been with anyone else. And because you've chosen this person to have children with, which brings up everything. So you have to face everything. But I mean, going back to like childhood trauma, before we go more into sexual past, do you think then that intimacy, affection, how did that affect you? Was that role model to you in a healthy way? I know you got a lot of affection from your mother, but did you see it?
It's interesting. So,
because that's where we learn, right? We learn from our parents.
I can't remember my parents being like affectionate at all.
I think in those days it was more taboo.
I don't know if they were or not. I think they were stressed. I think obviously my dad left when I was 6. I can't really remember much. My mother remarried. I don't remember that much affection or intimacy. I remember quite a bit of conflict, quite a bit of anxiety. So actually, when I think about my point of view growing up and looking at affection and vulnerability, it was all kind of maternal. It was all coming from a mother or a grandmother to me as a child, as a boy. And then I grew up with that through my teens without any real role modeling of adult affection and vulnerability within a partnership.
Which is a really good point. So you are used to receiving love.
Used to receiving love.
But not necessarily giving it, because that wasn't role model to you.
And it wasn't sexual in nature.
Yeah, so then your role of the woman, and I think we have come across this as a bit of an issue. You had maybe expectations, I think less now. You had a lot of expectation on me to give you a lot of love. Obviously, we're going into love language here a little bit, which we're not going to go into too much, but you wanted me to kind of nurture you more than A, I could, because I wasn't capable of doing it because of my trauma, and B, then I wanted to. I'm not your mother. I'm not going to see you on this golden pedestal that a mother will see their children through. So that, you know, what you've received from a parent, again, can really influence what you then expect from your partner.
I think a lot of men might be confused about this, and I think I was. So yes, I expect there's a level of expectation to be like unconditionally loved and adored by a woman, because that's what I experienced and that's what part of me wanted. But also unconsciously, I knew that wasn't good for me. That wasn't what I needed. So actually, I kind of rejected a lot of women that wanted to mother me, that wanted to like adore me. And I picked a woman that wasn't, like you said, either able or willing to do that.
Bitch. I was a bitch. No, exaggerating. Yeah. So that push-pull again, the inner child
So
wants
when we
something,
got into a
the adult wants something else.
I was attracted to you for many reasons. One of them being that there was a thing about your inability to.
I was a bit more aloof.
You're a bit more aloof, and you didn't have the childhood experience of that devoted mother.
No, definitely.
So that wasn't part of your makeup.
No.
But even though I knew I didn't want that from a woman, that still caused conflict in our relationship, because when we were in the relationship, I was like, well, why aren't you giving me that?
And you expected me to be that as a mother. I'm not a devoted mother. Of course, I adore our children, but I'm not a devoted mother. They're not my world. I have other things going on. So that was also an issue. So again, going back to what is wrong with you is massive. And I just want to say, kids really like seeing their parents kiss, cuddle, hug, hold hands, whatever it is. I mean, now as we're a bit older, it's all like, ew. But they love it. And I know they love it because it makes them feel safe. Because when we don't, the minute, they're like bloody police dogs, the minute we've had an argument and I'm being a bit frosty, or you're being frosty, they're like, you're going to get divorced. You never kiss. I never see you kissing daddy. I never see. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're always going, ew. And they're like, no. So they want it. And when you do it, they pretend they don't like it. But the minute they can feel a bit of distance, they don't feel safe.
They like to complain.
So I think they do really like to feel safe through that demonstration of affection. So don't hold back.
I agree. And what about early sexual experiences then?
Yeah.
How do they shape our relationship with sex?
Yeah, I mean, God, especially in England, very unhealthy cultural expectations, at least when I was growing up. It was the earlier you did it, the more mature you were. The earlier you did anything sexual, that was kind of like a badge of honor. And I went to a girls' boarding school and then a boys' school. So two very different environments, but a lot of expectations, which means that often people go into experiences that they're not ready for, that aren't particularly consensual. So it's back to that, having your boundaries crossed for whatever reason, that then make touch unsafe, because that is what is stirred up in you with a partner that is safe and loving. So it's always really important to recognize how you are feeling on the level below. So often before we would be into, when I knew that you wanted to have sex, for example, part of me wanted to, but like you said, especially if it was like scheduled, because, okay, the kids are asleep now, or kids are busy, quick, which I hate, but sometimes it's all you can do. I would go into freeze. My inner child would be like, oh, can't do this. And I would start talking about, did you do that thing do you remember we've got to go and buy us that? Yeah, did you do that? The car needs oil. Did you see that? And just come up with a list of like ridiculous things that were totally inappropriate for the situation.
You pick basically the most inappropriate thing. You're like, let's talk about our daughter's menstrual cycle right now. But what?
Oh, God. Yeah, that was my inner child going, anything to put the brakes on. I'm not safe. I don't want to do this. So if anyone out there is feeling that, the man or the woman, I want to say it's okay. And the best absolute thing to do is to name it. I hid this for a long time. So I was like, I should want to do this. I shouldn't be feeling like this. I don't think I was even aware that I was unsafe. Suddenly all of these to-do list things popped into my mind. So I wasn't even aware that that was my inner child. But when I realized it was my inner child and that she was feeling unsafe, and I could say to you, I don't feel safe. I don't want to have sex. Can we just hug or whatever? When you give that part of you permission to say no, everything changes. And usually that part of you will then be like, oh, I'm all right now. I'm fine. Because you've given her permission to say, I'm not ready. Hold on. And I think actually we came across this the other way around as well. Like you'd always say to me, why do you always want that? Why do you only initiate when I'm really hungover?
Yeah,
because you felt safe.
Yeah, there was a time.
You felt safe.
If I didn't want to have sex, like if I was exhausted or hungover back in the day, and I could barely crawl out of bed, you'd be like, oh, game on. Andrew, there's no testosterone. There's no desire to have sex. And you're like, Andrew's safe. Let's go.
So this safety thing was really big and caused issues with both of us. So just recognizing that your inner child will be everywhere. Your inner child goes to work. Your inner child is in your relationship. Your inner child is parenting. Your inner child is in the bedroom. It's really important to know that, because then you let yourself off the hook. You're not always in your adult self. So if you're not in your adult self, it's okay to react in these, inverted commas, unreasonable, inverted commas, ridiculous, whatever they are, ways, because it's not you. So you don't have to always be adult. Give yourself some slack for the ways in which your inner child is showing up. Give her permission to feel like that. Feel the feelings, perhaps explore them with your partner, because there's nothing more healing than that. To go through past sexual experiences, if you can, with a loving partner, that will heal them, because your partner can hold you through that and show that they're not the same.
And the other thing that...
What about your past experience?
I think it's important. We've done a lot of healing through intimacy, through our sexual relationship. And I think the key is, like you said, number one, to bring it out into the consciousness. There's nothing worse than just having two like inner children in the bedroom, trying to work it out on that level. It ain't going to work. So you need to be confident, honest enough to put your hand up and say, I feel like this. You know, I do find you attractive, but I don't want to have sex now. I'm feeling like this. I'm feeling like my inner child's here. Well, can we talk about this? Or can I go and do my own work? If you've got the tools, can I go and process this at this moment and then come back?
And not pressuring the other one.
Well, that's my second point. I think the thing that held us back the most is that it's very easy to get triggered by the other person's wounds with sexuality, with vulnerable, because you're like, I'm being vulnerable, and then your wound's coming up, so I'm feeling rejected, and then the other one reacts to the other one's wound and feels rejected by it, and then it becomes, well, you're making me feel rejected, and then it becomes a bit of a blame game.
Yeah.
And the real breakthrough for us, where it was like, okay, this is not, your wounds are nothing to do with me, my wounds are nothing to do with you. So if your wound comes up in that moment of vulnerability, I don't need to take it personally. I can just hold space for you to process and go through your process. And likewise for me, if something comes up, if I'm feeling stressed, tired, I've got performance anxiety, it ain't going to happen tonight. It's not like, oh, you don't love me, I'm not attractive, all this type of stuff. It's like, okay, no problem, do what you need to do. Let's move through this moment rather than kind of magnifying the wound by taking personally.
Yeah, absolutely. That was massive for us. Yeah, rejection, taking it personally. I know we touched on it. Maybe we can finish up on this point, because it is a thing, pornography. You touched on it. So I guess that relates back to early adolescent experiences, cultural expectations that aren't realistic. This can be a barrier, especially for the men. I think more men in general turn to pornography.
Yeah.
And then if you've grown up around pornography, you have different expectations of what intimacy even is.
It's just so dysfunctional. I heard something the other day that, you know, before the internet, you might see, growing up and having sexual relationships, you might see like 50 naked members of the opposite sex in your life. Right. You might share that physically. So it's like, it's exciting, it's interesting. You're exploring somebody's body, you're unwrapping somebody's body, and that's exciting, that's interesting. Now with pornography, like kids at the age of 12 have already seen like 10,000 different bodies in every shape, in every position. There's no like intrigue, there's no interest, there's no mystery to sex, vulnerability, nudity. So it just desensitizes everything.
So what would you recommend if...
I think the other problem with pornography is that it's easy. Like, it's like if you're feeling horny and you're like, do I need to go and like make space and try and convince my wife to have sex with me even though we're both tired, or can I just turn to pornography in this moment? And, you know, the kids are up, or my wife's in bed, she just breastfed, I'm doing the feed at 12 o'clock. You know, there's time. It's very easy to turn to pornography, but it just doesn't help. It is dysfunctional. I think for me, it's a decision. It's a mindset thing to save yourself, to preserve your relationship with nudity, naked body, intimacy, sex. Preserve that for your partner rather than this shiny, flashy thing on a screen. Yeah.
So we're looking at needs. Is your need really, is it just a need? Is it purely a physical need? Or is there more potential there for a closer connection with the person you've chosen to spend your life with? They're different, and you want to try and distinguish between the two, because a need could just be an addiction, which we will cover in another episode. But...
yeah, I just want to cover that very briefly, because I do see this quite a bit, like especially from men. So some men use like sex as a release, as a coping mechanism. It's almost like going down the gym or having a drink. So I need to let go. I need to have sex. And before children, men can unconsciously use their partner as that release, right? And then suddenly the woman...
and women, we can, anyone can do this.
And then suddenly that release is taken away from you because you've got young children. So there can be a lot of blame at that point. Like, you're not satisfying my needs anymore. I can't like get my needs satisfied. I need to look elsewhere. Like, and I think that's where the dysfunction is. So if you're thinking like that, and I've seen a lot of men's posts online like this, if you're thinking like that, like my wife's just had a baby and she's mothering, she's growing, she's feeding my child, she's getting up in the middle of the night, but I still want my sex and I'm going to leave her if she doesn't give me my sex. You need to look at yourself and your relationship with sex and see if it is a coping mechanism or a crutch that you're leaning on to deal with your nervous system and your anxiety and your trauma.
Yeah.
Because if it is, and you don't deal with it, that projection that it's your wife's fault can cause like lasting damage in your relationship and could even convince you to go and look, the grass is greener and you need to go and get those needs satisfied elsewhere, which is just going to perpetuate the generational trauma.
Yeah, so we're talking really about the difference between intimacy and sex.
In that case, sex. For sure.
Yeah. But also linking everything back, the trauma wasn't about intimacy, it was about the crossing of physical boundaries. You know, your physical boundaries were crossed without your consent. You felt powerless. So I think one of the main messages here is thinking about your past. What was role model to you? How did your parents role model or not affection? If you experienced physical punishment, which parent did that come from? How might that have affected your view of that area of your body? And that gender, how do you then view men or women as unsafe? And then you've got past sexual experiences, and then
They need to be
birth.
processed. So
Birth is a trauma as well.
Yeah.
So basically, all of these things are trauma. They're all different kinds of trauma. It's going back to what we do, psychodynamic therapy. Psychodynamic means understanding how your past is affecting your present. We don't want our past alive in our present. It's totally unnecessary. Well, at least in a negative way. So that's really important to look at all of your issues, look at where might that have come from in your past.
take responsibility, do the inner work, don't blame your partner. Get the tools and do the work you need to clear your past so you can turn up for your partner and yourself and your family in the present moment.
Yeah. And giving yourself permission to be that inner child sometimes. Your inner child is going to come up. She's not going to feel safe. She's going to feel threatened. She might feel rejected. That's okay. That's actually a clue. We're all just detectives. We're picking up on clues. We're following where that trail goes back to, and we're healing the root cause. And if you can do that as honestly and as vulnerably as possible with your partner, there is nothing more healing than that. Trauma happens in relationship, and it is repaired and healed in relationship.
Definitely. Well, thank you for listening or watching. If you've liked the content, then please like or subscribe or leave us a rating. And if you've got any questions or topics that you'd like us to cover, then please leave a comment or you can contact us through our websites.
If what we discussed was helpful, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. For more of the same, check out my social media, The Inner Child Healing Expert, or to work with me, go to laviniabrown.com.
You can find me on andrewlynn.net or Life Coach for Dads on Instagram. We work with both individuals and couples. If there are any topics you'd like us to cover, please reach out. Thanks for listening.